Hey, this is Anthony Cesari, and in this video, we'll be writing a melody with just one note. And then we're going to be looking at a few ways to make it way different from what we started with. And we're going to review the methods for doing that in a minute. But first, let's talk about why you would even want to write a melody with one note in the first place.
Why?
So the first reason to try this is that it can make melodic ideas much easier to come by if you're stuck. And as we're going to see later in the video, you can make whatever one note melody you've come up with into a multi-note melody if you want to at any point. Another reason to try this is that it gives you the opportunity to focus solely on the rhythm of your melody without having to worry about the pitch. See, melodies are composed of only two components, the pitch, or the up and down component, and the rhythm, which is the side-to-side component. So once you've landed on a rhythm that works for you, then you can look into turning your one note into more notes if you want to. Or if you like the melody at one note, you can keep it at that. And the last reason to try writing a melody like this is that it's a fun exercise to go through to see what you'll come up with, since it's unlikely you'll normally work this way. So doing things in a way that you're not usually used to can be a great way to strengthen your songwriting muscles. And if this is the kind of songwriting information you're interested in and want more of, be sure to subscribe to this channel to stay updated on our latest songwriting videos, and grab your free songwriting cheat sheets with the I in the upper right hand corner or in the description below. So the first thing you're going to want to do is come up with any random rhythm off the top of your head, and then I'll show you how to manipulate that into something worthwhile. And when you do this, don't focus on notes at all. Just think about a rhythm. A couple ways you could do this is either tap out a random rhythm on the table, or maybe go over to your guitar or piano and play just one note to any series of rhythms that sound pretty good to you. And there are two tricks to keep in mind as you come up with this rhythm, since this is going to become a melody. One is to use a metronome while you figure out the rhythm, because this will help you lock into a groove and keep your rhythm focused. And two is to keep your rhythm simple. So a simple rhythm will become a simple melody, and that's what people are going to get stuck in their heads, not something that's overly complicated. So later in the video, we'll take our one note melody and convert it into a more traditional multi-note melody. And I suggest you try out what I'm showing you in this video by following along with your own melody to get the most out of it. So keeping in mind this idea of banging out a single note rhythm on the piano, I did that here. I just put on a click track and then just played one note to that. I played a G, and it sounded like this. Now then I also added some chords underneath just to liven up this example a bit. And you don't necessarily have to do that yet, but I just want to bring this melody to life more. And also you may find that, as soon as you play that melody line on a piano, the next thing you're going to do is convert that into a vocal. And you can definitely do that. I'm just going to keep it piano here because I think it'll just be easier to show you what I'm doing. So anyway, here's that single note melody over some chords. And those chords are G, C, D, and then we're back to G again. And the single note that I'm playing over them is a G. Okay, so now since we're mainly focusing on melody here, what are some different things that we can do rhythmically to give us ideas before different notes are even introduced? And one of those things is we can use different starting beats for our melody. So what I did here, and what you're probably likely to do when you just come up with something randomly, is starting right on the downbeat, but we don't have to. So this is what happens when we shift that melody to the third beat. Then if we shifted it to the second beat, so you can see how we're already starting to get a totally different feel for the exact same melody and the exact same notes. All we're doing is moving it. We also don't have to keep it on the quarter note beats. We can also have it happen on the eighth notes or those and beats as well. So now this is what happens if I move it to a 3 and. So it's totally starting to lose its stability now. Whoa! As you start this melody on a different beat, it's getting less and less stable. It's always going to be that most stable when it's on that downbeat or maybe the third beat. But now when you put it on an and beat or a 2 and 4 beat, it's going to start to lose that stability and can give you some cool options. Okay, so another thing that we can do if we want to change up this single note thing that we have going on, I'll just put that back to the downbeat for now. But we can change the note lengths. Right now on each beat, here, 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 and here, just so you know the size of a measure, I've got mostly eighth notes, which are these shorter guys here for the most part, and then I got a few quarter notes in there as well. But now let's change up those lengths and see how that affects things. So now I've made it that every note plays until it hits the next note, where before I was doing a much more staccato thing. So let's see how that affects what we're doing. So again, totally different feel on this. Let's try taking it the other way and shortening all these notes. So now I have all the same notes, but now they're all set to 16th notes. So let's take a listen to that. Again, same melody here, all the same note, and just a lot of different options. Well, another thing we could do to change up the feel to the same melody, let me get back our original, is we could just change the tempo. So right now I'm at 115 beats per minute. So let's move that up to 140 and see what that does for us. That actually doesn't feel bad for this melody. This does feel like a melody that wants to move. So that's a pretty cool option too. Now let's go the other way. Check out 75 beats a minute. See what that does. So again, just something else that we can consider there. And another option that we could do if we're only using one note is to just use different note rhythms altogether. So basically, we would just start this whole example over again with just coming up with a different overall rhythm off the top of our heads. And then you can start to manipulate it the way we did with this one, with those same options. Because, it's not like this is the only possible rhythm that you can come up with. Whatever you came up with just by tapping out on the piano, you could do that again with a totally different rhythm to one note, and then you could just do all these other options to it. So basically you just start from the top and go all the way down the list again. And then the other thing to consider is that, you're not limited to doing one of these things and then you're done. You can also use some of these ideas together. So let's say we wanted to start this on the 3 and we'll put it, maybe we'll go like 130 beats per minute. And then we'll also go back to the staccato eighth note thing, since we're going to be at this faster tempo and it'll kind of lend itself to that. So now we're using all three of those methods that we looked at. We change the starting beat, we change the length of the notes, and we change the tempo. And that gives us this. So just more options for us to consider before we go back to the drawing board and just start with an all new rhythm altogether. So I think this starts to let you see the power in what you can do to a melodic rhythm that you just come up with, whether it's off the top of your head or if you're just, banging it out on your piano or guitar, because you can make all these changes before you even considered what note changes that you can make. Because that's the other thing, is you're probably not going to keep this as a one-note melody, but it does just give you different options for rhythms. And then once you have those different options for rhythms and you were able to isolate those without even thinking about notes, then you can go in and start to think about how can I change these notes and really make this melody different and something unique and special to you. So now that we've done all that, let's take a look at what this might become if we change the notes. Even though we're looking at single note melodies in this video, most of the time that's just going to be a starting point and you're not going to stay there. It's just a way for you to analyze your rhythm and then move on. So let's stick with the one note rhythm we came up with, and then we'll look at a few ways to vary those notes. Sometimes a cool thing to do is to just change only the last note. So you keep this rhythm all the way along, and then the last note is just a different one in the scale or a different note that's within the last chord. So in my case, I have this all on G. I'm just going to take that last note and bump it up to a D. So if all I did was change that last note, it would sound something like this. And I have other videos where I talk about what notes you can use based on the chords that you have underneath, so you can check those out there. I won't get really too much into that in this video, but I just want you to know that you can mess around with what that last note's going to be. If it's going to go higher or lower, it's probably going to be a note in your scale, and it's probably going to be a note in that last chord. But ultimately, just play around with that. Just make it different and see what those different options give to you and how that'll affect what this melody becomes. And if you listen to the song Part of Me by Katy Perry, this is basically the strategy that she uses in the first couple of lines in that song. So if you just listen to like the first 2 lines of melody in there, you'll hear it's just a 1-note melody all the way along. And then the very last note of those lines just goes, I think, down in that case. So another thing you can consider when kind of using this single note melody just as a starting point for a melody that is going to have more notes is you can use that single note, sort of like think of it as home base, the thing that you're always coming back to, but then you just, go on and off from that single note. So kind of similar to just changing the last note, but you'll just change a little bit more than that. I'll show you, I have an example of that. This is a pre-chorus of one of my songs called Our Love is a Work of Art. And you can see here, the melody notes mostly hang out on B here, but then there are some changes. It goes up a little bit in some spots, it goes down. And then especially, again, at the end of the line, it changes a lot. And then it comes back to that home base of B, moves up and down a little bit in certain spots, and then on the last kind of phrase, it just moves from there. And then the very last note of the phrase, it comes back to that B. So think of that B as, home base that it's moving from, but it's an anchor for the melody. So this is what that sounds like.
If a crack in the dam's the initial sign of the force from the water it can't confine, that was my excitement when meeting you. I was cracking a smile the entire time, a reveal of the feelings I held inside, when all this inspiration came crashing through.
So that's just an example of, thinking of that 1-note melody that you came up with as like the home base idea. And then the third thing you can kind of do is, if you really are just thinking of using a 1-note melody as a starting point and then getting rid of it entirely, you can just come up with all new notes. I mean, you'll probably keep that 1 note in there somewhere. Like in this example, I moved all the notes around a lot. And I do start and end on that G, but everything else I've changed around a lot more. So this way you're basically thinking of the 1-note melody as a complete experiment in rhythm, using all those different techniques that we looked at earlier for changing the rhythm. And then after that, then you're just going to say, okay, I'm just going to totally change around the other notes and see what those can be. And again, I talk more about what those notes can be in other videos, but here I just want to show you that I've only left the start and end as the same note, and this is what that could sound like. But again, you're going to have like infinite possibilities here. So here we go. And depending on your process, you're probably going to want to start singing this a lot earlier. What I would do if I was really trying to figure this out as a melody for a song is for every time I changed it, like I showed you here, whether I was bumping it back to a different beat or changing the tempo, every time I did that and I played the piano part, then I would put a melody with just like a nonsense syllable, like an ooh or an ah or something on top of that, just to see how that would sound vocally as well. But just to get through this video and show you visually more quickly, I just kept it to piano. Really just depends on what your workflow is like for doing this kind of thing. So if you're interested in digging a little deeper into writing single note melodies and how they can benefit your writing, I've got a bonus extension to this video in our member site, which you can learn more about with the link on screen or below the video. In that video, you're going to see how changing the 1 note that you've chosen can have a big impact on your final melody. So if you found this information helpful, subscribe to this channel and grab your free songwriting downloads with the links on the screen and below the video.